Thank you, Madam Chair. I would start by noting that yesterday, as I was eating my Wheaties, I read an excellent article by the South Dakota News Watch that was printed in my local newspaper, the Mitchell Daily Republic, and it dealt with this very issue, and I thought it was an in-depth and insightful piece, and so I would ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record, effort begins to reduce risk of death of South Dakota mothers during childbirth. Into the record.
Without objection.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is probably for you, Doctor, although if any of the panelists want to weigh in, I'd be interested to get their take as well. I was intrigued by some of the best practices that this article brought out, things that seem to me to be relatively low-hanging fruit. I'll give a couple of examples. Weighing blood-absorbing pads so that we can better ascertain how much blood loss a mother has had during childbirth. That doesn't seem very difficult to implement. Blood pressure cuffs so that medical professionals can have real-time information. So if they forget, if they miss a measurement time, they're still alerted to when that mother, when we've got a blood pressure problem. Again, I view this as relatively low-hanging fruit. When you look at the implementation of these practices across the country, on a scale from 1 being we're not doing any of them, and 10, we have perfect implementation of these best practices. Where do you think we are as a country?
Oh, man, 3.5 maybe. The good news is because joint 2, I mean, you bring up the blood loss one. So as a practice, as an OBGYN, we weren't measuring blood loss that way. You might be surprised to know that we would do things like look and say, it looks about like 1,000 milliliters. Like that's how we estimated blood loss. So it's a big shift in practice to actually weigh and measure the pads. So what you then have to do is say to the people who feel like, well, I've always done really great care, that women are dying because we are not doing this correctly as a field. This is a systems change. This is not about you as an individual and the care you provide, but a systems change. So that system shift has been difficult because people still believe in their own individual, that they as an individual provider are doing great things. So having legislation, having joint committee, having standards by governing bodies then makes for room for implementation to occur, as long as it's optional. And I'll even go back to it was exciting to have the CDC give money to states around maternal mortality, but we don't require it, so that's why you still have 3 states who haven't done it. So there are times that we need government to act, to put together policies that require things like you need to count the blood loss.
Yes.
Can I add to that too? Because I think those are practices like measuring, monitoring whether or not women are hemorrhaging and how much they're hemorrhaging, so that we actually know how at risk they are after they've had the baby. They go home and they're experiencing problems that were not dealt with when they were in the hospital. But the real issue is that we're not going to deal with the issue at the point of a woman almost at the point of death, right? I mean, if she's hemorrhaging to that extent, she's so close to potentially losing her life. The issue is, how do we move more upstream? How do we address these issues of women's health before they're pregnant? What we find is that increasingly more women that are pregnant have chronic health conditions. They're obese, hypertension. One of the leading causes of death for women as a result of pregnancy and childbirth are health-related, heart-related challenges. So how do we make sure that women are able to manage their health before they're pregnant so that they don't have these problems exacerbated as a result of pregnancy and childbirth?
So maybe a follow-up, Dr. Kerr-Perry. We mentioned standards and national bodies. This article talks about the Joint Commission, which I think has some oversight or engagement with, they said, about 80% of hospitals in the country. I mean, if I'm looking to some repository of best practices, if I'm looking to a source that really has it right, is the Joint Commission a good place for me to pay attention to?
So I was on the Joint Commission task force to create those measures, and so I think there are people in that room. The American College of OBGYN has the AIM bundles is a great place where you can look to find a repository of best practices, and that's really who, through HRSA, has been funded to build the policies out. The CDC has the perinatal quality collaboratives, and they really need more funding to uplift those collaboratives. In South Carolina, I just spoke at your annual meeting around maternal mortality in South Carolina, and really having more investment in the perinatal quality collaboratives would be so important, because that's, when you get the number and the data, someone has to implement it. So who's gonna say to the people in South Carolina, are you measuring your blood loss? It's gonna come from that perinatal quality collaborative who needs support from legislation.
Well, thank you very much, and Madam Chair, what an important topic and what a meaningful conversation we've had. Thank you.